Hello, we are going to compare out BuddyBoss to Fluent Communities today, and we're going to be looking specifically at the settings in the backend. As a technologist, I'm always looking at bridging the gap between the technology and the business outcomes. Tools are great, but do they actually achieve the goal, or do they just make your life harder? So today we're going to be looking at the settings specifically on your choice of whether you want to go with BuddyBoss or Fluent Communities to understand what you're getting yourself into in either scenario. So let's start with our first contender, BuddyBoss. So we're going to be looking at BuddyBoss settings here. So I'm logged into a WordPress site. And this is the BuddyBoss interface over here on the left-hand side. Now, there's a blessing and a curse with our more complex tools like BuddyBoss. I kind of akin it a little bit to the cell phone plan that gives you like all of these different features. Like you have unlimited calling and this and this and this and this. And it's like, well, I only really use it for this one very simple thing. And I kind of think of this like just like overblown tools of like, what do you actually need it to do? And I find that for most of our clients that are looking to have a social community, BuddyBoss is honestly just overkill. It's just too much. It's too complicated. It's too hard to maintain. There's too many settings. And then what ends up happening is you spend so much time fiddling with all of the different things that you can do with BuddyBoss, and you really lose the value of the overall of like people just need to be able to post. So you can see on here, they've got like different components. So we'll just go through each one of these different items just briefly of kind of like where this can go wrong. So you can enable or disable all of these things. And what I see when my team is implementing something like this, you get so caught up in all of these different things. You go down all these different rabbit holes as far as like, okay, well, do we want forum discussions? Well, maybe, do we need activity feeds? Like, oh, media uploading, I don't know. And it becomes this whole conversation of whether you need all of these different things. Like the complexity here is just very, very high. And if you are already on a tool and it's not doing quite what you want, and BuddyBoss does require that, then the complexity does make sense. But I think for most people, it's probably more complex than really what it needs to be. Not only that, but when we're implementing BuddyBoss, a lot of the times we're just stripping away things versus knowing what, like there's a lot of things that are automatically enabled that you have to do that we have to turn off in order to make it work properly. So there's like specific pages here for like member pages, the video pages. We don't use any of this really on most of our sites. And I've been using BuddyBoss for over 10 years now. Implementing it, maintaining it across clients in the multi-7-figure realm of like, what are the things that we actually use? Registration pages, we don't use any of these because BuddyBoss does have a membership functionality, but typically a membership tool is going to have a more robust functionality for this than BuddyBoss does out of the box. And I'd rather use the best-in-class tool versus their cover-off functionality of registration pages. So, and then there's some other, you can see, so with the settings, there's some duplication. So we have components pages over here, which is also our top tabs. So I'm going to go into settings on this. So there's some general settings, allow members to delete their profiles. Don't really understand why you'd want to be able to do that. This kind of doesn't really matter. Again, registration, which we're coming back to again. Social login is pretty cool, but if you're running another membership functionality at the same time, it will make your life a living poopsicle. You just want to run a lot of testing with that. And then there's some registration restrictions, privacy on this. Like we don't generally touch a lot of these things unless there's a good need for it. Integrations, the app. A lot of people get really excited about the BuddyBoss app. I've heard more stories about how people have tried to get it working and it seemed really great, but then when they actually got into using the app, it kind of like was a half-formed thought in a lot of ways. So it was great, but then didn't actually do what they wanted it to do in the end. It's not to say that it can't work, and I know that some people, I've met a couple people that it's doing a good enough job, but I've met far more who have tried to implement it and not actually been able to get value out of it. And it's not cheap too. And there's other ways to kind of get that app feel without necessarily having to do the app feel. This is just their upsell functionality. I'm on both of those already. And let's go to tools. It's just like overwhelming. There's just so many things in here. So we got default data. No, don't use that. Why? No one knows. So we'll go to profiles. I'm trying to find the things that we actually do use in this. Again, wouldn't use this because we're not having them. And most of our setups, we're talking multi-7-figure companies. Like we're not using any of their built-in functionalities because it's just not as robust as what we need. Groups is probably one of the main ones that we would use. Of like, what are all the different groups? I'm not going to scroll down just because I don't want to share like private group information. So these are like these typical, like what are the different like channels that somebody can potentially join in BuddyBoss. So this one's probably the main one, that the main setting we'd be really looking at. Then we go to activity. And like this just shows all the member activity. And again, just for privacy reasons, I'm not going to scroll down too much on that, but that shows like all of the activity in there. And it is a little bit lackluster. Like it's really hard to, like, it's a nice idea that you can see it all in the back end, but from an administration perspective, it kind of, again, like is just hard to use. Invites, emails, notices. Let's just go here, site notices. This is kind of cool. We don't really use this a ton, but this is kind of a fun feature just like overall that you can do that's not even really related to BuddyBoss, I would say. It just allows for like the notification when people log in to have that on there. Let's go on here, ready launch. This is new. I haven't fully tested this, but it looks kind of cool. A lot of it, of like what we need to do, ends up being some customization, custom code. So hopefully with this ready launch functionality, it's more out of the box. So like this is probably one of the core components of what we're like styling. So the groups, and then really this, like looking at the logo, looking at the colors, because the colors by default are like trash. Typography, try to stay away, like just in general, like I don't love using custom typography. It's part of the reason it produces a lot of slowness. So ideally I would just use something that's actually built in. Custom typography with this, like it is kind of built into BuddyBoss, so you're not like uploading your own typography necessarily here. Header, so there's some good settings, but like this just does end up being a rabbit hole of when I have my team going in and doing this for a client. It's like, where do I even start on this? So there's some cool things in here, but overall, I find that BuddyBoss is just bloated. Again, this comes from 10 years of setting up, maintaining, and our like speed to like implementation. BuddyBoss implementation, you're talking at least 4 to 6 weeks to just iron out all the kinks, make it work. It's not to say that you can't do it within less, and we will often try, but then you get into it and it's like, oh, this thing's not quite right, and this thing's not quite right, and this thing's not quite right, and it snowballs. Whereas I'll walk you through Fluent Communities, like we can get Fluent Communities up in one working block. So for our customers, a working block's $500 US, and we do a little bit of prep work. We set up and like teach them how to use it on the call, and then it's like people can just have at her. And I've never been able to do that kind of pass off with the BuddyBoss system, where I can do a little bit of prep, sign off, and like show them a tool, and then they're able to run with it after the fact. With Fluent Communities, we've done it time and time again right now, and it just works. Whereas with BuddyBoss, we get our two main things that we constantly get troubleshooting issues are BuddyBoss and LearnDash. And then the great one is when people have both of those installed. It's basically a troubleshooting and error. A lot of the times, most of our work with them is just putting out fires. And I wish I could say it's like one specific issue, but it's always just different flavors of issues that come up with those two tools. And I know causation, we'll make another video on that another time. So let's go into Fluent Communities as comparison now. So this is the Fluent Communities interface. Now, to give credit where credit is due, of a lot of the newer tools that have come in have the benefit of looking at the current tools on the market and saying, how can we do this better? How can we simplify? BuddyBoss is one of the first on the market of tools doing social, which is why it ends up being quite bloated, because things just get added on. Fluent Communities is only a couple years old, and I've been really, really happy with their development process of like new tools and new things that have been adding on, but things that actually make my life better, not that just add bloat onto the tool. So right away, you can see it's a lot simpler of an interface. You've got portal settings, customization, advanced features, managed courses, documentation, and change community URL. Very simple. The main thing of the difference between Fluent Communities and BuddyBoss is BuddyBoss works within the WordPress ecosphere of like what the standard plugin should do, whereas Fluent Communities have kind of like bolted on something else and made their own kind of like map. I know that's hard to understand. If you have questions about it, please do comment below and I'll try to make it a little bit clearer. The main reason of why this matters to you is that unless there's a specific integration with Fluent Community, then there's not going to be a plugin that you can just install that'll work out of the box with Fluent Community. Whereas something that is built within the WordPress kind of like parameters, a lot of plugins will just work with it without having to like necessarily create a specific integration. With that said, I'm really happy with all of the integrations that Fluent Community has done. And because they have webhooks in the background, like we've been able to do pretty much anything we really wanted to do with Fluent Communities. There's like maybe one or two things, but overall it's been really good and really stable as a tool as well. So let's get into it. So we're going to go into our portal settings. And I think I wasn't sharing the right tab here. So I'm going to share this tab just to show you. This is the Fluent Communities section here of like their overall settings, and then we'll switch to this one over here. So this is like when you actually get into it. So it honestly has a lot more stuff over here, but because it's cleaner and it's outside of WordPress, sometimes it just feels like more manageable, and it's just a lot more separated out where I can have somebody go through and customize this. A brand new team member that has training in the Technologist mindset can go in and set this up without a ton of direction, honestly. They again have these like login URLs, but we use a custom URL path for the most part in all of our different clients, and it hasn't really caused any issues on that. So there's the general like logo options, then we've got customizations as far as I believe it should be like enable dark. It's all just like check marks, and it shows really clearly like what it does here, which just it makes our speed to getting it launched a lot cleaner. You have managers of people that can actually manage the content. One thing I really do love about Fluent Communities as opposed to BuddyBoss is that Fluent Communities allows your members or community members to be able to say whether they want an email digest, which is something we can't do in BuddyBoss, and it's been something that's constantly requested. And it works pretty well. So it's just like a general digest of like everything that's been posted, and a checkbox, people enable it, haven't really had too many issues with it. And I think great technology shouldn't take up a lot of mental space. It shouldn't charge you a thinking tax. So you have like the email notification settings on here that you can update. Really clean, really easy to understand. Features and add-ons. And a lot of these like we don't enable, but like follower mode, but like most of these are disabled. But a lot of the things that we need to disable are disabled in this background, whereas with BuddyBoss, if we want to remove them, we have to go into the code to remove them, which just makes it more challenging. Most of ours we do like Jiffies though, not on this particular one at this point in time. And like they have their own like whole Fluent options or whatever else here. We don't use a lot of them, but it's nice to have those options there. Then you have your topics for social of just like what are those different feeds. It's the group version of what you saw in BuddyBoss. And then you have, so topics are actually different. The space groups is what you were talking about on BuddyBoss, and then the topics are within those spaces. And then you can easily update the menu here. What I love about this is that we can do the initial setup for a client and then walk them through how they can update and use it all down the road. And they don't really need a ton of support from us, which I really quite like. And then you can enable content moderation, which is great. Like there's no functionality for that in BuddyBoss as far as I know. Privacy settings. So you can update this, and it's fairly like just, easy to do. And then this is specifically if you want to use Fluent CRM. So if some of our clients that are just starting out, Typically, we will specialize in like 7-figure, multi 7-figure, but we do help companies that are starting out that want to get to that level and they want to set up a good foundation. We'll sometimes start them with Fluent CRM just because of cost. And this has a really nice integration with this. And this is probably my favorite part here is incoming webhooks. This allows us to connect to pretty much anything that we want. We're not using them on this particular site, but it allows us to connect to any CRM or any other tool outside of it. Like it plays well with others, whereas BuddyBoss, I just don't feel like plays well with others. It sits in its own. And then like they've just released this fairly recently, which is analytics. You can see beta on this, which is really cool to be able to see of like how many members, how many posts, how many comments, and how many spaces. And I think that this is going to be more, they're just going to continue to build it out. One of the things I've really enjoyed about Fluent Communities is their development cycles. They continue to release new things, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I wanted that. This is amazing, and that's been great. And their support's been really good too. There have been limitations of it, but most of the limitations I feel like are within the realm of reason, not when I see a limitation of a software that I'm like, this seems like a reasonable thing that if you had thought through your software and thought about it from a user perspective, you would have thought about this. I haven't seen any of that with Fluent Communities. So overall, that's my comparison. It's pretty biased, I'm gonna be honest. I am biased. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I have to deal with not only implementing the softwares, but how does it work over time? Because as a technologist, I am looking at not just the technology, but bridging the gap between the technology and actually producing business outcomes. That means technology should make your life better. It should make it cleaner. You should have more clarity. It should give your users better customer experience, not make things noisier, provide more work and more overwhelm. But more often than not, technology does not deliver on that process, which is why as technologists, we bend it to our will. If you have any questions, you can comment below or reach out to us at businesstechninjas.com.